Welcome to Just AI. This is Paige Lord. I'm your host, and this is covering the news in AI policy, and responsible AI for the week of February 3rd, 2025. Super excited to have you here, and thanks for tuning in. This week's episode is titled All Eyes on DeepSeek. We're definitely covering more than that in this episode, but a huge chunk of the episode is dedicated to DeepSeek. And the primary reason is because there were so many news articles with so many different angles because of what happened with DeepSeek this last week. So I wanted to make sure that I could give you a really clear deep dive on exactly what was going on so that you could be really informed. Yeah, a couple of things to kind of, start us off. I know it's been kind of a heavy week for people. Last week was a heavy week. Especially with a number of policy changes, and people are processing those and figuring out what can change and what cannot change, what is legally able to change, what is not. I know that there are a lot of people in the federal government as well who are faced with a choice about whether or not they are going to stay in the federal government or they're going to leave. There's even some questions about the legality of that as well. So a heavy week from that perspective. And then add on top of it the news of the helicopter and plane collision. And so I just wanted to take a minute off of the top to share how deeply heartbreaking that was, and sending love and care to all of those who were affected by that and the family members of those individuals who died. So honoring them today. I think a lot of people are feeling really grateful that we made it through the month of January. I know we talk about it every year. It seems like somebody posts something that says that January was 2 years long, and it really does feel that way, coming off sort of the rush of the holidays, getting back into work in January. And then, it's stick season for a lot of people. So it's very dark and gray and just, a harder month to get through. But we made it through the month of January. We're into the month of February. In Charlotte here, there are signs of spring, that it's around the corner, which has been really amazing because, we had a day the other day that was 70 degrees. But then the news from Punxsutawney Phil came out today that Phil has predicted 6 more weeks of winter. So our groundhog didn't come through for us this year. So we have 6 more weeks of winter, which is a huge bummer, but we are moving steadily towards spring, and it is getting lighter every single day. So I hope you're encouraged by that. I also wanted to share that it's Black History Month. So you may or may not be aware of these statistics, but only 4.9% of software engineers are Black, compared to 52.3% white software engineers and 33% Asian software engineers. There's definite room for there to be more Black software engineers. And, this is a podcast at the intersection of justice and artificial intelligence. So it shouldn't be surprising to people that a variety of perspectives matter in my field. So cultural, social, financial, emotional, gender, racial, all of these perspectives matter, especially when we build technology that is meant to mimic humans. It doesn't work to build technology that is representative of only one perspective. And that's how we end up with technology that is not representative of humanity. So to honor Black History Month, I'm going to share a bit about key influential individuals who have made major contributions in the field of technology and human rights. I'm super excited about that. So I'll get into that in just a minute. But I wanted to share a little bit of the weekend chatter. I had a lot that I did last week. I flew in on Monday to New York City. I attended an event with All Tech is Human on Monday night, and then I came back on Tuesday and quickly prepared for a keynote presentation that I was giving at a conference on Friday. Thursday, drove to Kinston, North Carolina, where I gave my presentation on Friday morning, and the topic was responsible AI in small businesses. And if you are somebody who was there at that conference, the SMS 2025 AI and Social Summit, thank you so much for watching my talk and for connecting with me and engaging with me. It was the nicest group of people, and everybody was so engaged and so curious about the topic that I was addressing, and had a lot of really amazing questions. And so if that was you, thank you so much for your support and for your encouragement. It was such a lovely time to be able to get to know people and meet folks out there. And then this weekend, I've just been spending time largely working on, getting the podcast together and getting it ready and doing my deep dive research on DeepSeek so that I could bring that summary to folks. Also, we had guests at our house this weekend, which was unexpected. It was last minute. We made pasta and they went to a show. And then, it was just a really nice to kind of have people in the house and be able to welcome people and have guests. So that was fun for us. And then if you're in the Charlotte area, also, I know this isn't a Charlotte focused podcast, but if you happen to be in the Charlotte area, We walked to a place called Cafetto in Noda, and it's a new coffee shop, like a little coffee truck. It was lovely and delicious, and it was packed. There was a huge line, so that's how you know it's good. All right, so diving into our Black History Month person that I want to talk about, this is Marie Van Britten Brown, and this is an excerpt from blackpast.org. So if you want to check out more historical information, you can definitely go take a look at that. But she invented elements of the modern day security system that we enjoy today. And she was born in Queens in 1922. She was a nurse, and her husband was an electronics technician. And as far as I can tell, she lived in Queens her whole life. She was born there, she passed away there, and then she lived there with her husband. And their work hours were irregular because of the jobs that they did. And they felt like they were leaving their home really vulnerable because the crime rate in their neighborhood was pretty high. It's also noted that the response times by police were very slow. And so if there was a crime that was taking place at their house, it took a long time for law enforcement to be able to get there, by which time a lot of damage or harm may have been done. And so she decided that she was going to take matters into her own hand, and she started inventing a system that would allow her to be able to see visitors and then quickly contact authorities. That's what she wanted. So the components of her system included 3 peepholes at different height levels, a camera that moved to capture images through each peephole, a monitor inside the house to view the visitor, a 2-way microphone for communication, a remote-controlled door lock, and an emergency button to alert the police. And this is in the 60s is when she filed the patent, which was in 1966. It was called the Home Security System Utilizing Television Surveillance. And this was pretty early days and truly novel for her time. Her patent was granted 3 years later in 1969. It was featured in the New York Times, and it was recognized with an award from the National Scientist Committee. So a big deal. And her patent has been referenced 13 times by other inventors, including as recently as 2013. So her invention really laid the foundation for what we know to be modern home security systems. I have a Simply Safe system, and her key features from her design that were adopted into other systems include the video monitoring, the remote controlled door locks, the push button alarm triggers, the instant messaging to security providers and police, and the 2-way voice communication so that you can chat with folks. We have all of these in my home. We have the video system, and we have the video monitoring, and we have the locks that we can lock from our phones, and we have the push button alarm triggers. We have all of these things. And so it's interesting and very cool to know where that came from. So I just wanted to share that little bit of history with you. And then just to address her legacy, she had 2 children. One of her children, Norma Brown, became a nurse and an inventor, just like her mom. And she lived in Queens until her passing on February 2nd, 1999, at the age of 76. So that's our little Black History Month piece of history there. I want to dive into the notable news now. There's a few topics that I want to make sure that you're aware of off the top. I'm not going to do a deep dive into these, but I wanted to make sure that you were privy to them. The first one is that Articles 1 through 5 of the EU AI Act are in force. They are working. They are functioning as of Sunday, February 2nd, 2025. If you are doing business with AI in the EU, you need to be sure that you are adhering to this law. If not, it's going to cost you between $35,000 or possibly up to 7% of your total global annual turnover from the previous year, which for some businesses could be tens of millions, possibly hundreds of millions of dollars. So definitely need to make sure that if you're doing business in the EU, that you are adhering to those acts that are in force and preparing for the other articles that will come into force further in the year. The next thing is that there's a couple of press releases that launched this week that were shared about a number of people who are being hired into responsible AI positions. There's one in Lloyd's Banking Group, and then there's another one in India. They're establishing the India AI Safety Institute for Responsible AI Innovation and the leadership there. That news item of those press releases of people in responsible AI partners really nicely with something else that we're seeing right now, which is the rise of AI policy. And I want to talk about 2 cases here, and then I'm going to talk about those news articles, the responsible AI individuals, as well as these policies and what they mean and what we can kind of glean from this information. One of the policies that I want to talk about is that the Illinois State Court came out with a policy on artificial intelligence that is in line with the American Bar Association. There are a couple of things I want to share, a couple of quotes. The first one is, the Illinois courts will be vigilant against AI technologies that jeopardize due process, equal protection, or access to justice. Unsubstantiated or deliberately misleading AI-generated content that perpetuates bias, prejudices litigants, or obscures truth-finding and decision-making will not be tolerated, period. Another quote is, "The rules of the professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct apply fully to the use of artificial intelligence technologies. Attorneys, judges, and self-represented litigants are accountable for their final work product. All users must thoroughly review AI-generated content before submitting it in any court proceeding to ensure accuracy and compliance with legal and ethical obligations. Prior to employing any technology, including generative AI applications, users must understand both general AI capabilities and the specific tools being utilized." So this is saying you, in our court systems, whether you are an individual who's representing yourself, whether you are a lawyer, whether you are a judge, et cetera, you have a duty to understand the technology that you're using, the limits of that technology, as well as the output of that technology, and you have a duty to review it. So they're not saying you can't use AI to help you with your court documents. What they are saying is that you're responsible to review any AI-generated materials. And then they're also saying that you cannot use any AI-generated materials that could mislead individuals or perpetuate bias or violate somebody's rights. So shout out to them. The second, which was a little bit surprising to me, caught me off guard, is the Vatican. So their decree number 702 of the Pontifical Commission for the Vatican City-State. It's meant to emphasize the responsible and ethical use of AI within the Vatican City. The Vatican City is in Rome. I want to give a little bit of information on the Vatican City in case you've heard of it, but you don't really know about it. It's in Rome. It's 109 acres, which is 0.17 square miles. It has a population of 764 as of 2023. It is the world's smallest country, and it is ruled by the Pope, who is the head of the Catholic Church. It is a city, and it is also a country, and it exists within a different city. But it operates as its own, and so it gets to kind of make its own rules. And because the Pope is the head of the Catholic Church, anything that comes out of the Vatican City, anything that comes from the Pope, really matters. People listen to it. People pay attention to it. And so what happened is that they had their AI policy go into effect on January 1st. They said that AI must respect human dignity, the common good, and maintain an anthropocentric approach. An anthropocentric approach is an approach that regards humankind as the central and most important element of existence. And so that means that AI doesn't get to be prioritized over humans. It also says that there's no room for discriminatory AI uses or uses of AI that lead to subliminal manipulation. It establishes guidelines for AI use in healthcare within the Vatican, AI uses for cultural and heritage preservation, et cetera. What I think is happening when we talk about responsible AI leaders who are being put into place, we're talking about more policies that are coming in more and more powerful institutions like the Vatican and like the Supreme Courts of states. What I think is happening is that the United States is signaling that it's not going to be heavy-handed on policy in the next couple of years. And I understand that the Vatican is not within the United States, but often places will wait to see what the United States does and then follow the cues of the US. And I think what's happening is that we're not seeing signaling from the US that there are going to be meaningful regulations that protect people from nefarious AI uses. And we are going to see, right, we've already seen it, deregulation that's going to pave the way for innovation. And with DeepSeek and everything that's happening in the AI world right now, there's a huge focus on countries dominating in this space. So that's a lot of what's happening right now. What I think is happening with these appointment of these responsible AI leaders and these policies in particular is that when there's a void of policy that people can lean on to protect them, institutions and companies will step in to try to create their own sources of protection. That's what I think we're seeing right now, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that as we move forward into the next couple of years. Companies are not playing around. They want to make sure that they're protected. The best way for them to know that they are building AI responsibly, that they are protecting themselves, their brand, their users, etc., is for them to have a full understanding of their tech stack, their AI uses, and clear rules within their companies and within their institutions about when they can and cannot use artificial intelligence and how that should be used, where there should be human checkpoints, all of that. Those are our three notable news items off the top there. I also want to just touch on the quick hits real quick. This is where we get into the content that's in the newsletter. If you're new here, I have the Just AI newsletter on Substack. You can look it up, Just AI Substack or PageLord Substack. And I closely follow the topics that I cover in the newsletter, but I definitely give more of a deep dive here on the podcast. And so all of these links will be available in the newsletter, including these quick hits. So an Army helicopter involved in a fatal crash over the Potomac was not using AI, sources say. That is the title of the article. It's coming from Defense Scoop. The paradox of responsible AI, widespread usage coupled with distrust. That's an article out of Forbes. Very interesting. And then the tech bro that wasn't on Trump's inauguration stage. That's coming out of NPR. All right, diving into our responsible AI news, I'm going to talk about one piece of news this week, and that is DeepSeek. But I'm going to cover a lot of different angles of this DeepSeek news. And the reason I want to talk about this is because you may have noticed that the DeepSeek launch of their R1 model rocked the US stock market last week. And I wanted to give people an explanation of why so that we could all be informed about what's happening because competition is really heating up. So DeepSeek is an AI lab that has released free and open source large language models, one at the tail end of last year in 2024, and then they just launched another one last week. And the reason people are panicking a little bit is because their model, which they launched, outperforms Meta, OpenAI, and Anthropic models in accuracy on challenges that are related to complex problem solving, math, coding, reasoning in general. Now, one of the things that is giving people pause is that DeepSeek is a Chinese company. And when you are a Chinese company, that means you are subject to the whims of the Chinese state. So if the Chinese government darkens the doorstep of DeepSeek and says, we want all of the data that you have from anybody in the United States who has been using your model through this app that they launched, they can get it. The DeepSeek is required to give that to the Chinese government. That's just the way the Chinese government rolls. That's just the way things are in China. And so that is a huge challenge. Okay, so why did the DeepSeek R1 rock the markets? It cost more than $100 million to train OpenAI's GPT-4 model. And even Sam Altman, in an article last year I read, he knew that that type of cost was not sustainable. Like he knew that AI companies were going to have to work hard to bring down the costs of training these AI models because it just wasn't going to be sustainable long term to spend that kind of money to train these models. So companies for the last couple of years in the US have been working very hard to do two things. The first one is to create models that can accomplish different things and that can do those things incredibly well. So it's not enough just to have a model that you can chat with, then you have to have a model that can create images, and then you have to have a model that can read images, and then you have to have one that you can use voice with, right? So we're seeing all of these evolution of these models, but not only do they need to be able to do those things, they have to do them very, very well. And that's an important part of this. The other thing is that these companies have been trying to find a way to build and train those shiny new models for a lower cost. And that is where things have gotten trickier and trickier because the costs have just continued to go up for creating these models. Now, here's why DeepSeek's R1 model rocked the market. And this is based on the information we have available to us. There are a number of investigations into DeepSeek right now, so we may have new information in the future. And if we do, I will certainly share that with you. But right now, here's what we know to be true. DeepSeek created this model using Nvidia's H800 chips. And these chips are less advanced than their H100 chips. The H100 chips are chips that were blocked from being able to be exported to China, but the H800 chips, which have a fraction of the computing power, are technically in line with the export laws enacted to keep China from advancing in AI. So the limits on China, it kept them from getting certain chips, not getting all chips altogether. And DeepSeek was able to use legally the chip that they were able to have access to, and they were able to create this model. So that's one thing, is that they overcame a barrier and they did it legally. The second thing is that they used a training technique called distillation. And this is where a teacher model transfers its learning to a student model. And this part panicked people because this is what contributed to the cost of training their model, which was a mere $6 million, pennies compared to the historic and exorbitant costs of OpenAI's models. Again, I shared at the beginning, but OpenAI's model, their GPT-4 model, cost more than $100 million to train. And then DeepSeek was able to train this model using open source technology for $6 million, a significant cost reduction. And then DeepSeek also made their model available at a significantly lower cost than US rivals. So people who wanted to use AI to build their business or to be able to create a tool, they were able to use DeepSeek's model, which is better than OpenAI's based on the benchmarks that we're seeing. And they were able to use it as a fraction of the cost, which was a huge win for a lot of companies who are feeling overwhelmed by the cost of using some of these models. Now, there's also evidence that these Chinese state-linked accounts, including those of diplomats, embassies, and state media, amplified the release of the model and promoted hype that led to a spike in downloads of the DeepSeek app on the Apple Store, and that quickly outpaced the downloads of ChatGPT. So not only did DeepSeek release their model, but they also released their app where you can go on and you can use it. It's like using ChatGPT on your phone. And there was a coordinated effort from state-linked accounts to promote and to hype up the DeepSeek app and the DeepSeek model. And a lot of people wanted to give it a try. So they downloaded it and they bumped ChatGPT's downloads out of the way and became the most popular download. To summarize all of those points together, because I want to make sure that we're all on the same page before I move into the next bit. DeepSeek used what they had available to them, which was a legal chip and open source technology. They used a cheaper training technique to create a better model from US providers, which they made available at a sharply lower cost. And they used their considerable US social media accounts and influence to increase hype, which sparked interest, which sparked engagement, and which ultimately caused the panic among investors. A masterclass in technique in creating interest and drawing people into the story. A masterclass. Okay, so now that I've laid that foundation about why the market was spooked and what exactly happened, let's talk about some responses to this from US AI companies. The first one I want to talk about is OpenAI, because OpenAI responded in three major ways. The first one is that Sam Altman issued a statement and said it's, quote, legit invigorating to have a new competitor. And then he went on to assure people that OpenAI's products would still be better than DeepSeek's. The second thing, he claimed that DeepSeek had stolen OpenAI's training data via their training process. And that is hard for us to stomach in the responsible AI community. I'll go into this a little bit later, but OpenAI stole their training data from everybody else. So there's a bit of a double standard there, which I'll talk about later. And then OpenAI got competitive. They promptly released their O3 mini reasoning model for free. So they did make it available to people for free, where in the past, when they would release a new model, it would only be available to paying customers. Not so. If you're not a paying customer with OpenAI, you can still have access to the O3 mini model. And then they also, for paying customers, tripled the daily message limits for those customers. I think it's pretty safe to say that OpenAI, based on their response here, was caught off guard and that they were sufficiently spooked by this. So a little bit of a challenge there for OpenAI. Microsoft had a little bit of a different response, although it was in line with what OpenAI's was as well. Microsoft's CEO talked about DeepSeek at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and he said, to see the DeepSeek new model, it's super impressive in terms of both how they have really efficiently done an open source model that does this inference time compute and is super compute efficient. We should take the developments out of China very, very seriously. And then Microsoft also got competitive, and they launched OpenAI's O3 mini model on the Azure AI Foundry and on GitHub models. And then they worked to assure investors in their earning calls that DeepSeek's model was a good thing, that this wasn't a bad thing for Microsoft, that Microsoft wasn't caught on a back foot. And then Microsoft also opened a probe into whether or not DeepSeek was improperly using OpenAI's data. So it'll be interesting to see what the results of those probes are. But Microsoft had a big and a very quick response. And I can say that because for those of you who have heard from me before on this podcast, and for those of you who are new, I work for GitHub, which is owned by Microsoft. I was there when we got the call saying that we were launching O3 Mini on GitHub models, and I got to be a part of that launch. And then Alibaba responded by launching a model Qwen 2.5 that they claim surpasses the DeepSeek V3 in benchmarks. Here's the problem. All eyes are on DeepSeek R1. They're not on DeepSeek V3. DeepSeek V3 is old news in terms of models. And so Alibaba finds themselves a little bit out of pace with what's going on right now because they've launched a model and shouted about it, but it's only outpacing the old news models. It's not outpacing the new one. The CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp, said that the DeepSeek model showed that the US needs an all-country effort. So that shows you too that he's like everybody. It's not just about one company now. This is everybody in the United States needs to pull together to be competitive. And he believes that DeepSeek has awakened the tech world to the threat of second movers. And this is the idea that even though you're first to market, that doesn't mean you're going to remain there. You're going to remain dominant. The second movers have a bit of an advantage here because they can come in and use things like open source models from Meta and basically undercut the people who are first to market by doing it better or faster or less expensively, which is something that DeepSeek has been able to do all three of. So definitely a second mover in this space and super competitive. And then Meta made a statement saying that they believe that DeepSeek's success validates their open source approach to AI. If you remember when Meta launched the Llama models, people were beside themselves, could not believe that Meta launched a model open source. But Meta said, we believe that this is truly better long-term for AI innovation. And they're saying that this validates that they were right. You know, OpenAI, Anthropic, they keep their models closed to the public. But Meta launched these models and people could access and download and use them. And that is in part how DeepSeek was able to gain a bit of an edge. They got to use the open source Llama models in some of their early development to be able to build the scaffolding for what they have today for their R1 model. I think that this does a couple of things. You know, Meta is probably looking at this saying, okay, because this open source model that we launched was able to enable another competitor to come in, it's disrupted the field, which means it's anyone's game now. It's OpenAI is no longer the leader in AI. It's anybody's game now, which means that Meta could slide in there and become the leader. And it really has disrupted the hierarchy of things. And I think that it's also is likely to keep the United States from implementing any type of tight regulations by having another competitor in the market, especially from another country, especially from a foreign adversary. So I think that Meta is saying this is actually working to our advantage. It allows us to be able to be competitive. It means that we might be able to swoop in and take the lead. And it means that we will likely not have to contend with a lot of regulation in the next couple of years so that they can continue to try to take the leads. So Meta is saying that this validates their open source approach to AI. And I have to say that for right now, I agree with that. I also want to talk about the global response to DeepSeek. So what are countries saying about this? A lot of countries are making moves right now. South Korea's Personal Information Protection Commission, which is the country's information privacy group, is asking DeepSeek how personal information of users is managed, and then they'll make their decisions about whether or not DeepSeek will be made available in South Korea or not. Italy completely banned DeepSeek within the country due to a lack of transparency regarding user data and handling. Belgian consumer privacy organization Testenkoop filed a complaint that DeepSeek might not be complying with the GDPR rules, very serious, and they opened a complaint which is prompting Belgium to investigate. Portugal's consumer privacy organization filed a complaint with the Portuguese Data Protection Authority. France and Ireland have also been investigating as well. So countries around the world are all eyes on DeepSeek, all eyes on China, trying to get an understanding for how the model was trained and how the data is being handled and whether or not it's secure, whether or not it's being stored, whether or not it's being handed over to the Chinese government. So there is a lot of concern there. They are skeptical at best about the DeepSeek model. And I think that's with good reason. So I think this tells us two things. One is that the world of data privacy is alive and well. And the AI that you're using, it matters that you know how it was trained and what kind of training data it had. And it matters that you know how your prompts are being used, how your information is being used, and what access is being granted. So something for you to kind of keep in mind there. Now let's talk about the United States really quickly. If you thought that the United States did not care about DeepSeek, I have news for you. The US Navy, NASA, Congress, and the Pentagon have all banned the use of DeepSeek by personnel, citing very serious security concerns. President Trump, who is still trying to find a solution to keep TikTok available in the United States, has shared that he believes that this is a positive development, but also that it's a call for the U.S. to be laser focused on competing to win. I could not find a quote for him on anything related to privacy and security. Here are a few more things that I think you should know. The first one is that DeepSeek is not infallible. So Wiz, a cloud security company, took a look at the back end of the model's databases, and they said that within minutes, they were able to access a huge amount of unencrypted internal data. Essentially, DeepSeek's company secrets that are not shared publicly were all of a sudden accessible by Wiz. And once DeepSeek was alerted to this, they immediately began to shore up these vulnerabilities. So they put this out. The other thing is that the DeepSeek app has been a major concern with people asking questions about controversial topics that the Chinese government has sought to rewrite in their own history, such as, for example, the circumstances related to Tiananmen Square, which were student protests that were held in the middle of China's Cultural Revolution. There are a number of videos online of people using DeepSeek, asking questions about these types of controversial events in China's history. And then the app shares a result, and then the app erases the result and comes back and says that it actually can't give you any information on that. So it is self-censoring, and you can actually watch that self-censoring happen in real time on topics that are controversial for China, where they would like to maintain a very specific party line. Now, why this matters, I want to just dive into a couple of things here. One is the concern relating to the training materials. It is concerning that DeepSeek may have inappropriately used OpenAI's training data. But what makes this a major concern for society, and I mentioned this earlier, is that OpenAI inappropriately used the whole world's information. OpenAI went out there to the world and grabbed books and grabbed information and everything off of the web that they could, and they scraped from different publications, and they grabbed photos, and they did everything, and they brought it all together, and they used that as the training data for their models. And then when somebody else turns around and does it to them and says, hey, we're going to take this and we're going to go ahead and train this model on your training data, then OpenAI gets upset. And I understand that OpenAI has terms when it comes to their model, that they have, ways of saying, hey, you can't use our training data, but they didn't respect that with everybody else in the world. There was no respect for anybody else's materials that were online, stories that were important to them, artwork that they cared about, before OpenAI went out and grabbed it and said, this is ours now. So a bit of a double standard for OpenAI, and just something for you to keep in mind. While this is definitely a bummer for OpenAI, I am not sad for them, because they have gone out and they have systematically pilfered everybody else's materials in order to benefit themselves, and then locked it up and said nobody else gets to benefit from it. The second thing is that there are huge national security concerns. As we talked about, Chinese companies are beholden to the whims of the Chinese government. So that means that the Chinese government can get what they want when they want it from DeepSeek. So a huge concern for governments all over the world. The other thing is that how governments and companies the world over go about navigating DeepSeek really, really matters. And it appears that there's kind of a split approach, with governments blocking access while companies embrace the new technology and the brand new competition. So DeepSeek, just to kind of bring it all in summary, people are really concerned about it for a lot of reasons. There's competition reasons that people are concerned. There are concerns about inappropriate use of training data. There's concerns all over the world about data privacy and about how DeepSeek uses the data. On the flip side, people can recognize that this is a massive innovation, and DeepSeek was able to do what they were able to do, rattled the US market, because they were able to build something better. They were able to build it faster, they were able to build it cheaper, and they were able to get people using it en masse. And it's definitely something that we absolutely need to be keeping an eye on. We're going to go to a promotion break and we'll come right back. Surprise, it's me. I am the sponsor. I'm Paige Lord. I'm the founder and CEO of Just AI, and I just want to say thanks so much for being here today. And if you are enjoying the content, if you found the deep dive on DeepSeek to be really helpful, if you wouldn't mind just letting us know by leaving a review or a comment, or if you have feedback, you can also get a hold of us at hello@justaimedia.ai. I take feedback about these things really seriously and would love to hear your perspective, if there's something we could add or change. But if you're enjoying the podcast and you're finding it to be helpful, if you wouldn't mind following, leaving a review, sharing it with a friend, sharing on social media. You can also follow along on YouTube. And if the show is helpful for you, every share and like and rating and comment really helps us to be able to further our mission of empowering everybody at the intersection of justice and artificial intelligence. So thanks. All right, coming up on our AI policy news, Texas is catching some heat for a new proposed AI bill. And I want to make sure that people know off the top that this is proposed. This is not enacted. This has not been passed. So it is not the law in the state of Texas. But they've introduced HB 1709, which is a strict AI regulatory bill that rivals California and Europe's approaches. Now, if you remember, the EU AI Act did in fact pass, and the United States sent them a letter and basically said, hey, we think this is too strict. California tried to pass a law that pretty much mirrored the EU's AI Act, and it ended up getting struck down because people really felt like it was going to hinder innovation in the state of California and in the United States. So the bill establishes a risk-based framework of AI oversight targeting industries like healthcare, finance, legal, and appears to be modeled after the EU AI Act. This is what we call the Brussels effect, where the EU government, which is based in Brussels, will come out with some kind of regulation, and it's considered a model regulation, and then it finds itself popping up all over the world where other countries just adopt that framework and scale it down to the size that they need it. This also happens in the United States. California's privacy laws, data privacy laws, are very closely modeled after GDPR. So this bill in Texas and also the one in California are modeled after the EU AI Act. It is part of the Brussels effect. Now, we think that it is based on the EU AI Act, based on its risk categorization tiers, which is a very important part of the act. And if passed, this would ban AI systems that manipulate human behavior, score individuals based on social behavior, or capture biometric data. Under the Act, AI developers must prevent algorithmic discrimination, ensure data security, conduct annual impact assessments, and companies could face fines up to $200,000 per violation or $40,000 per day for noncompliance. And, there are people who say that bills like this could create heavy administration burdens that could slow down AI development. There's a couple of concerns here. One is that this could put the $500 billion Stargate project at risk if this were to be passed in the state of Texas. So that's certainly a concern. The second thing is that we also have to consider Texas's history. Texas just received a $1.4 billion payout from Meta last year in a settlement because they put a law into place in 2012 where they said you cannot capture the face data of our residents in the state of Texas and use that to train your AI. And Meta did that because they weren't privy to the law, or they ignored the law, or they misinterpreted the law. We're not really sure of the details there because they didn't admit any wrongdoing. But they did settle out of court, and it took years for them to get that victory, but $1.4 billion that they paid to the state of Texas. So Texas is not the kind of state that, I think people would think that they're a little bit more lax in these areas. They're actually very strict, and they're also ahead of their time. So this will be interesting to see if they actually put this law into place. And the final AI policy story I wanted to talk about this week is that a judge threw out facial recognition evidence in a murder trial. And this was very interesting to me for a number of reasons, but one of them is that I wrote my master's thesis on the intersection of AI and privacy law. And my specific topic was the use of facial recognition technology by U.S. law enforcement and ways in which that might infringe on civil liberties. So the details of the story are that a recent Ohio court ruling excluded facial recognition evidence in a murder case, raising concerns about the reliability and legal challenges of AI-driven policing. The case involves the February 2024 fatal shooting of Blake Story, where investigators used Clearview AI to identify the suspect, Keon Tolbert. Police failed to independently verify this person's identity. So what you are required to do in a situation like this, and this is what the judge is basically saying, is that you can't just use facial recognition technology as the first clue that this person might have committed this crime. You have to have some kind of other evidence that points clearly to this person being a suspect before the artificial intelligence can come in and be a second source of evidentiary support. So police failed to independently, without AI, verify this person's identity before they obtained a search warrant. So the only evidence that they really had to go on was this facial recognition match. And facial recognition technology is not 100% accurate. It is particularly inaccurate when trying to identify people of color. So facial recognition technology, it's not always accurate, and it can be really inaccurate to the point where it can negatively impact somebody's life. And so essentially, the judge suppressed this key piece of evidence. They wanted to kind of bring it as evidence. The city did, and the judge said absolutely not because there's no probable cause. Probable cause is the legal standard that gives law enforcement the right to search, seize, and arrest someone. So law enforcement can't just come to your house and knock on your door and come in and search you and search your home. They have to have some kind of evidentiary support that says we have a reason to believe that this person has committed this crime, and then they have to get a warrant, and that warrant has to be signed by a judge, and then they have to go and present that warrant, and then they can perform the search. They do not have probable cause in this case. The only thing that they have is a facial recognition match, which is not enough. So the decision underscores the broader issues with facial recognition technology, including accuracy biases and lack of transparency and legal admissibility concerns. This is a wild case to me, honestly, and good on this judge. So we're seeing this more from courts. Maine, Massachusetts, Illinois, they've all posed restrictions on the use of facial recognition technology outputs as evidence. And AI, I just want to be really clear with people. AI is not a catch-all solution. Law enforcement has to use traditional investigative tools first and AI second in order to uphold due process and constitutional rights. So a huge victory, I think, for civil liberties in that case. All right. Final bit here is our research corner. So this piece of research called From Efficiency Gains to Rebound Effects, the Problem of Jevons Paradox in AI's Polarized Environmental Debate. This paper takes a look at the climate crisis. And as it deepens, there's kind of two polarized perspectives on this. One is that some people are saying, come on, AI, even though it may negatively impact the planet because of its uses, it's actually going to have a positive effect on renewable energy and materials discovery and large-scale emissions monitoring. Other people are saying, well, wait a minute, AI has a huge growing carbon footprint. It's got massive amounts of water consumption, and it takes a huge amount of materials and resources. So it's already having a negative impact. So you've got kind of these two camps here where some people are saying, but the benefits are going to outweigh the negative impacts. And the other people are saying, well, wait a minute, these impacts matter now, though. And there's no guarantee that the benefits are going to outweigh the negative impacts. So a lot of this debate is concentrated on what they're calling direct impact, which is energy and water usage in data centers, e-waste from frequent hardware updates, without addressing what they call the significant indirect effects. So this paper is examining the problem of what's called Jevons paradox and how that applies to AI. And Jevons paradox is an economic principle that states that when a resource becomes more efficient to use, demand for the resource increases. So they're arguing that understanding the second order impacts requires an interdisciplinary approach, and they outline that. And they also talk about the rebound effect and how rebound effects are going to undermine the assumption that improved technical efficiency alone will ensure net reduction in environmental harms. So that for the people who are saying, but this is going to improve efficiency, they're saying improving the efficiency isn't enough to negate the harm that's being done or that could be done to the climate in your pursuit of innovation, in your pursuit of efficiency. It's just not enough. And then they go on to say that the trajectory of AI's impact hinges on business incentives. Will we incentivize businesses to deal with their carbon footprint and to offset that? It hinges on market logics. It hinges on governance and policy making. And it hinges on broader social and cultural norms. So these researchers ultimately contend that a narrow focus on direct emissions, as opposed to second or tertiary emissions or effects, misrepresents AI's true climate footprint, and it's limiting the scope for meaningful interventions. Basically, they're saying you're focused on the wrong thing. You're looking at the wrong thing. So it's going to be an interesting paper. It's one I'm going to talk about more during Earth Month, which is in April. So I hope that you will consider tuning in April to hear more about AI's impact on the climate. And that's all I have for you this week. So I just want to say a couple of things just to end here. The first one is to make sure that you stay awake and stay alert and read the news. Now, you've got to stay up to date on what's happening, especially stuff that's coming out of the White House, because there's so much of it coming so quickly. And I understand that people are hugely fatigued by it. Some people are worried that their rights are being taken away. Some people's rights have already been violated. There are a lot of people who are in that camp and where they're struggling to keep up with what's going on. And I think that's the tactic of the Trump administration. And this isn't something that I'm saying in some kind of nefarious, sneaky way. This is information that has been shared by previous Trump advisors, that this was the plan all along to make sure that they could advance their agenda as quickly as possible. And what that looks like is putting out policy after policy after policy after executive order, and keeping that information coming as quickly as possible. So we all need to make sure that we don't look away from that. Even though it's hard and even though it's a little bit overwhelming, we need to make sure that we're staying up to date with the news. But I also understand that people need to take care of their mental health. I myself had a really hard week last week from a mental health perspective, feeling a little bit overwhelmed. I was traveling hither and yon across the country, And at the end of the day, I realized that I was getting a lot of my news from TikTok and from Instagram. And I just realized I don't need that. I don't need that constant barrage of information from those two apps. So I got rid of both of them off of my phone, and I agreed that I would check the news in the morning to stay updated on what's going on, and I would check the news at 5 o'clock. And that gives me enough time to clear my head and clear my brain before I go to bed. And so I've made those decisions for my own mental health because I still want to stay informed, but I also want to make sure that I'm mentally well and that I'm able to handle these updates that are coming in a way that works for me and is beneficial, not just for me, but for the people around me as well. So those are my updates. I hope that you're able to prioritize, just your mental wellness this week. We did make it into February. We are well on our way to spring, so no reason to lose hope. And I just want to say thank you guys so much for being here, and I hope that you enjoyed this. Make sure you rate, make sure you comment, make sure you review, send us feedback, hello@justaimedia.ai, and I would love to get any feedback from you. So thanks so much for being here. I hope that you have an amazing, amazing week. We'll see you next time.